Hi, I'm Russell Ward, and this is part 3 of my series on how to sell pickleball paddles. In my first video, I talked about finding a pickleball paddle manufacturer to represent. In part 2, I discussed some of the details of selling pickleball paddles. In part 3, I'm going to talk about frequently asked questions about pickleball paddles and how to sell them. So I'm going to do make some comments in random order. So the first thing is, always have your demo paddles with you. It's highly important. This is the only true way to sell a paddle. You must have your collection of demos with you. And what you're going to find is that I've had players buy after just using a paddle one game, had that many times, and then some, they take a little bit longer and you have to be a little bit more patient. But you will find that with the demo paddles you'll sell at least to 80 to 90% of the players that you're servicing. So it is my opinion that you don't loan out your demo paddles. I've had way too many instances. Remember, I've sold 150 paddles, and what has happened is someone borrows the demo paddle and it takes me 1 to 2 months to track them down. All of a sudden they go on vacation, all these weird things happen, and it's hard for me to get it back. And in the meantime, someone else wants to use that paddle. So I have a personal policy that I have to be on the courts with them and they have to use the paddles only when I'm with them. I will schedule times to meet them, that's not a problem, to use the demo paddles, but I will not loan them out. So a creative way now to find some new business, to find some new players, is to actually hold your own beginners clinics. When I worked for a major paddle manufacturer, every Tuesday night, right near our office, we would actually conduct free beginners lessons. Sometimes 6 people would show up, but we had up to 20 people that would show up. So that could be something that you could look into in your area, because there's always players intrigued about getting started and they would love to hear from you so they can pick out the right paddle for them. So keep in mind that when you're selling a paddle, that you're going to have return customers. I've had players buy not only just one paddle, but maybe a second type or a third type of paddle from me. So you're always having return business. So just don't think about the customer as one sale. They can come back to you time and time again, and also bring their friends at the same time. So speaking of having paddles for sale, always keep them in your car nearby. Try not to special order or volunteer that there's another color. Because what happens is you can get really lost in having to do a lot of extra ordering that is really kind of needless, and then there's shipping involved. So try to sell what you have in stock. Rarely does someone ask me, do you have it in this color? I just say, these are the colors I have, pick from that, and they're like, okay, that's what I'll do. So keep it simple. But you're going to find some players that they still need more time to decide. So what I ask them to do is the paddle that they've kind of narrowed it down to, I ask them to take a picture of it, is what I do. And that helps them to reinforce what paddle they used. And also because I work with so many different players, because of the volume of paddles I sold, I don't remember what paddle they used. And so I was just out of the courts today. I had 2 different players I was working with. Both of them took a picture of the paddle because they still needed a little bit more time. But you're going to find players, though, that you're going to be in that 10% or 15% that you don't have a paddle that matches their swing speed or style of play. Don't get frustrated with that. Just wish them well, and maybe give them some direction where to maybe find another outlet to try some paddles. Now, one of the tricky areas about the paddle is the weight. I have a lot of players come up to me and say, do you have a specific weight? And most of the time that I do have a specific weight, but what I try to help a player see is that don't focus on the weight, but focus more on the feel of the paddle and how it feels in your hand and when you hit the various shots. And and focus more on that than the weight. If it does feel too heavy, of course, or too light, I will work with you in that. But I encourage a player not to focus on that. Now, the other thing about the paddle is the grip size. So most of your grips are somewhere between 4 1/8 and 4 1/4 inches. And so 80% of the players we have found over the years as working for a paddle manufacturer, that's what 80% of the players like. They don't need something bigger or smaller. So if someone needs a wrap that has a larger hand, they can double wrap it. That's not a problem. But I find if you triple wrap it, it actually makes the paddle off balance. So be careful that it's a lightweight wrap that the player puts over that. Now, if they need one, a size that is smaller, you can actually arrange with the pickleball paddle manufacturer to customize a smaller grip. I would advise you, though, to encourage the player to buy 2 paddles at one time, because the special order, it takes longer, but the manufacturer is more than willing to do that, okay? So moving from there, let's talk about collecting money. That's a big deal. So in my world, I grew up with this expression, cash is king. And so that's the first thing I say to them, do you have cash? If not, do you have a check? If not, do you have a Venmo account? V-E-N-M-O. I love Venmo because there's no fees taken out of the transaction if they send me money from their Venmo account to mine. So investigate that. If not, if they don't have those options, I do have a credit card option. I like to use Square. They have a little device that plugs into the bottom of the phone. You can swipe the card. Square gets 3% of the transaction. So if it's a $100 paddle, they get $3. So that's up to you whether you want to do that. But I'd hate to lose the sale. If you say to a player, go home and I'll see you next Tuesday and I'll collect the money from you that time, they forget. You have to strike while the iron's hot. So collect the money right there. So from there, you want to keep your books separate from your personal books, your pickleball paddle books from your regular checking account. So I opened an online checking account with Capital One. I love it. The reason is they have an app that I can scan. If someone has a check, I can take a picture of the check. It'll deposit it right to my account. Very, very seamless. I really like that process. So find something that's really simple that works for you, but I would have a separate credit card and a separate account for your pickleball transactions. So you've sold the paddle to the player. Take their name, their phone number, and a picture of them and put it in your contacts. The reason is after you sell 20 or 30 paddles, being optimistic, that what happens is a player reaches out to you and wants to do some sort of follow-up. They have a question about the paddle, excuse me, they want to buy it, they want to refer a friend, but if you don't take their contact information and then they text you, you feel kind of foolish because who is this person? I don't remember them. So if you put that information in your contacts, it'll really help you to have quality customer service because you will remember exactly their situation. So that also leads to do a master list of sales. So what kind of paddle, date of purchase, and the price paid, and the name, and so forth. And the reason you want to do that is a player might come back to you and say, well, I've only had this paddle for 6 months, and I'm having a problem with the grip, or the edging is kind of pulling away from the paddle. What can you do about it? But then you find that, well, they've had that paddle maybe for a year and a half. Most of your manufacturer warranty are only for 1 year. So if it's over a year, I will say to the player, well, the manufacturer won't honor any warranty. But sometimes it's a fixable situation, sometimes it isn't. But I, excuse me, I encourage them to actually buy a new paddle. And guess what? They do. So, but if they have it less than 6 months, make sure you're familiar with the manufacturer's warranty. Sometimes a rattle will happen in the paddle. the edging will come loose, the grip will have a problem, but it's very rare. It's like less than 2% of paddles, really, you're gonna have hardly any problems with any returns or anything like that. Now, the other thing about the paddles is I recommend that you store your paddles in room temperature. So don't keep them in the car or your garage where you have either extreme hot or extreme cold. This actually affects the performance of a paddle. So please keep that in mind, that try to keep your paddles in room temperature. They will last longer for the players as well. And now just a couple excuse me, of other things is I like to put a guard around the top of my demo paddles. See this guard here? And this is called Gamma Guard. And the reason I do that is that when these demo paddles, they get a lot of scrapes. It's hard to kind of see, but they get scrapes on them. And so it starts the edging starts to deteriorate because of the amount of people that use these. So I put this guard on here, and it's from my tennis days, and that has really protected the paddles really well, and it makes them look a lot more presentable for the players, okay? And also, one other thing that happens is a player will come to me about once a month on average, and will say to me, I have a competitor's paddle, and for some reason, tennis elbow has emerged because of playing pickleball. And it's important to hear it's because they played pickleball that the tennis elbow pain came about. Now I have an entire video about that dynamic, but the bottom line is oftentimes you can hand them another paddle and in your lineup, and I've seen many occasions where the tennis elbow goes away. So that's kind of fascinating. But I have a video about that. Please visit that at a separate time. So these are my frequently asked questions about pickleball paddles. I'm sure I've missed a few. So in the comment box below, if you have another question, please feel free to leave it. I've so enjoyed doing these videos. I'd love to hear your comments and insights from you selling as a dealer, and maybe we can collaborate and maybe do a fourth video that might go into some further details. But thanks so much for watching. I'm